time. You want to kind of just tell us your story and how you got started?
So I've been doing rescue for about 15 years. Before I was officially with any rescues, I was just bringing animals home, finding them off the streets, things like that, helping if they had collars or whatever, helping get them back to their owners and stuff. And then once I moved to Idaho Falls, somebody got me in touch with a rescue and I started fostering. And then I just, it kind of snowballed. Of course, now that we're like recording, now my throat's going to get this way. But then it just kind of snowballed that I started with one rescue, and I was kind of more picky back then. My kids were a lot littler, so I only took a few at a time. And then as I just started getting more and more comfortable, I started reaching out to other rescues and kind of fostering for everyone. And now I foster for I don't know. I think I have my main ones, but I'm a approved foster for probably 15 or so different rescues.
Wow. Okay. All in Idaho or just kind of in the surrounding states as well?
Surrounding states and stuff too. I've done one in Washington, and then I've got contacts everywhere. So if I need an animal or need to get an animal somewhere, I've got contacts all the way in Texas. We've got one in my co-founder and I for our personal rescue. We've got a contact in Canada now for Shar-Peis and stuff. So our rescue reach is really, really far, but most of who I foster for is mostly Idaho, but a few out of state.
Okay, well that's incredible how I see rescue people band together and really fight hard for some of these animals. So you got involved 15 years ago, and how many dogs would you say, and do you do cats as well? How many animals do you think you've moved through your home?
So mostly no, I don't do cats. I currently do have 2 cats. And then I do Sphinx rescue. A few years ago, a fellow rescue person, she had some family issues and stuff going on, some tragedies in her life. So she had a few Sphinxes that I babysat for about 9 weeks, and I just fell in love with the breed. So I started pulling just only Sphinx cats in. And we've had several of those. One came in through rescue, and I just lost him on Friday. We were selfish and we kept him. But then we've had a few others, and then I've got the two cats right now. So I've only had a few handful of cats. Dogs, I don't know specifically. In the year of COVID, when I had contacted you about Gypsy, we did actually count, and I had 47 dogs in my home from January to December.
In 2020?
Uh-huh.
All right.
Including Gypsy.
Including Gypsy, yeah. I guess one of my biggest question is for you or for other rescuers, what is it like when you bring home the dog or the puppy that first day? What are you seeing in the dog? Depending
on what you're bringing home, a puppy versus an adult. Now that I am much more comfortable, I tend to take some of the harder ones. I take some of the behavioral cases, some of the ones that beginner fosters wouldn't feel comfortable with taking. So we've had a lot of bite dogs, a lot of aggression dogs, a lot of under socialization dogs. So for those first days, for those type of dogs, it's really walking on eggshells. It's really slow, kind of going back to the basics of the dog world. So depending on their initial reaction, we're muzzle training, getting them used to the muzzle on their face, getting them used to the leash around their neck. We've got a pretty good pack of dogs. So we start with some of our more calmer and more behaved ones, and we do lots of walking up and down the road and in the grass, side by side walking. They get to keep the muzzle on, they get to keep the leash dragging. So if they're in the house and I need quick to be able to grab them and pull them away, I can while we're being safe. And then we start introducing some of my little bit more hyper. I've got a pretty high-strung German Shepherd, and then I've got my old man that he's mean to everybody. So he's usually one of the last ones to intro to. He's 14, he's deaf and blind, and a dog bit his eye out, so he's only got one eye. So he's the last one, because we've got the small dog rule that you get to meet all the big dogs first, and then you get to meet the small one last, and everybody has to be nice to the small dog because he's small and you guys can do the most damage, and then because he's the most fragile. So if they pass through everybody else, they get to meet him. And then it's just really first couple of days are really slow, really kind of monotonous, and not the happy fun that everybody thinks like bringing a new dog in would be. It's a lot of training. It's a lot of work the first couple of days. Puppy is, depending on their situation, puppies are a little bit easier. You don't have to do quite as much socialization stuff and the slow stuff going, but still letting them come up and sniff each other from a distance, things like that.
What do you think it's like for them to come from one home and being moved into another? How do you think that affects dogs? And you've had so much experience in the rescue world. I'm sure you see kind of a variety of reactions, but what do you see the most, I guess, reaction wise, from them going from their home into a foster or the shelter even?
Lots of stress, lots of anxiety. They're a lot like us. You have some dogs that are really happy and they handle it pretty well, and then you have other dogs that get very depressed. They get really anxious. They might behave in ways that they don't usually behave because of the situation. We've got to have kind of a full spectrum. So we've got seniors that their owners were going into hospice. So they'd been with one home their entire life, and it wasn't a horrible tragedy situation. Just owners got sick and they had no one else. Those ones are sad and they cry, and it's really hard on them. We've had dogs that have gotten bounced around a bunch. They're really anxious, and they maybe they show a lot of bad behaviors, a lot of destructive behaviors, a lot of anxiety in the beginning. Or then you've got some that choose to show aggression because there's a new environment, new smells. They've never been taught those rules, or if they've been in the shelter for a long time, those are really loud, high stress, high energy places, and they've got a lot of like pent up energy that they can just react aggressively.
Okay. So over the years, you've seen dogs rehomed for probably various reasons. Do you feel like, since you've been in rescue, do you feel like there are times where that is like something that is necessary for this dog? Like I as a trainer, I see it all the time where people are like, I just can't do this anymore, I'm rehoming the dog. And I see some people that have tried so hard and there's like, it's not working, I can't. And then there's others that don't try very hard and, move the dog along. And so I wanted your take, since you've been in for so long. Do you find that there are times where that was probably the best option for the dog?
Yeah, I do agree that some people's tenacity is not as good as others. We in rescue do get a lot where they've put minimal to no effort in, and then it's just easier to just get a new dog. But those dogs end up having those type of people get other dogs and have the same problems. There are times that I think that it is okay to rehome a dog. I think it goes back to before that decision gets made, ownership needs to be taken into account. Before you get a dog, educating yourself on the breed, the energy requirements, the work that's going to have to go into it, the temperaments. If you know that you're a couch potato person, which is fine if you are, but if you know that you're somebody that doesn't leave your house a whole lot, a border collie is not a best idea, or a German shepherd or a Belgian Malinois. So if you get a border collie and then it's destroying your house, you can't really be that upset at the dog when you didn't do that breed research and you brought it into that environment and it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So I think that there's a lot of accountability that can be had in that just before those decisions are made. And I think that if you are one of those people that didn't do a whole lot of breed research, it's your responsibility to go the distance with them. One of my German Shepherds, actually, we specifically foster failed her. That's where we adopted her and chose not to send her out, only because I knew that nobody else would be able to handle her. She's extremely anxious and extremely destructive. We have not done training with you, and I hope one day we get to put her in there. We had intentions of putting her and my other Shepherd in your class this year, but another foster took precedence over that. So we chose not to adopt her out because I knew nobody else was going to be able to put in the dedication to her that she needs. So we have chosen to keep her, and we know how to navigate her. So
yeah.
I just give you that example of rehoming. Even in the foster world, even with someone with as much experience as me, I had Gypsy during COVID. We got her in February or March, and I kept her through until November. And we had contacted a trainer in Boise, we had contacted a trainer in Utah, and finally we had contacted you and had her in obedience training, and still struggled with Gypsy. And we did all of the things. We taught her to mat train, we taught her to target train, so she would come and touch my hand. We did muzzle training, we did socialization and obedience with you. And finally, I was at my wit's end. She had bitten several times in my household, and she was starting to become really dangerous. So we ended up calling it quits with her, and we put her in a boarded train facility that was 24/7 around the clock trainers. And she was only in that for about 2 months before she was adopted, and successfully adopted to a home with kids. And she's been adopted for, I think we're going on 2 years.
Awesome.
So it's perfect example that me having all the experience, I had to call it. I had to say I can't anymore. So it does happen, and I think that it is okay for those that really try.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing your experience and that story. So for people who might be thinking like, there's so much that needs to be done in rescue, I don't know where to even start or how I could help, or I know I can't take in a dog, but are there other ways or other avenues where I can get involved as far as rescue work goes?
Yes. So donations, after COVID stuff, there was a ton of donations, financial, monetary donations during COVID. And then since COVID restrictions have been lifted and everybody's kind of getting back out there, with inflation and cost of everything going up, donations have really, really tanked. But the rescue flood has actually gotten a whole lot worse. Adoptions are down nationwide. People just aren't adopting anymore. And then people also aren't financially helping anymore either. So rescues have double, triple the amounts that we usually have, and medical bills after medical bills after medical bills. So if you're somebody that can't open your home up, blankets are always needed, food is always needed, monetary donations are always needed. Transport, like you said, people moving from here to here. If you know that you're living in Boise and you're headed to Salt Lake and you've got room in your trunk, jump on a transport and take a dog from there to there. And it doesn't cost you anything, but it helps a ton.
Yeah. Are there cases that move fairly quickly or smoothly versus really difficult cases?
Yeah, so that's where going in and being picky. So in the beginning, I was pretty picky about what I brought home. I did typically puppies 3 months to around 18 months old. As bad as it sounds, I did more of the cuter ones. So and this isn't anything to do, so I'm not saying anything negative about like pit bulls, but like black and pit bulls, I didn't take at all. Traditionally, because across the country, black dogs, any breed, black dogs are the #1 euthanized dog in shelters. And then everywhere has huge stereotypes against pit bulls right now. That's the breed of this generation is anti-pit. So those traditionally are really hard, or have been in the past really hard to move. I have had black pit bulls and I've moved them fairly quickly as well. So it's not everyone. So if people wanted to get started, you can be picky. I know a lot of people think that they can't, but you can say, I have an Aussie Doodle, so I only want to foster Aussie Doodles because I know the breed, I know the temperament, I know what to expect. Or if you want to stay with just German Shepherds because you had a German Shepherd growing up, then you could just pick German Shepherds. If you want to do seniors, then you can pick seniors. There is a community out there for seniors that just want your older dogs. Typically, I would say if you and then ask all the questions too. So I've got kids that I need to be concerned about. And when I first started, they were little, they were 6 months old. My youngest was. So you can ask if they're good with kids. And if they say if they're not sure, then you can ask them to be tested. And, you need to make sure. If you've got cats in the house, you can ask if they can be cat tested or if they're cat proven. If you've got chickens, you can ask if they're chicken proof.
Okay.
So you can be picky and you can ask the questions. And if a rescue says like they're not sure or whatever, you don't have to commit to that one and you can wait until the next one. But typically I would say that they're in your house, a good temperament, good behaved dog that doesn't have a lot of issues. Maybe owners were moving and they'd had the dog for the last year and a half and it was just a timing situation. So it was a good, well-rounded dog. You probably have that dog in your house for a month, maybe 2 months. So during COVID, for me to be able to have 47, I was able to move. I mean, obviously I took a lot more than your standard person. I was taking 7, 8, 9 at a time. But most of them were maybe a month or two. So some of the ones that I hang on longer is because I'm being selfish and I can't let them go yet. And I'm building my way up to it. So they don't all have to stay in your house forever, but some of your harder ones do. For example, we had a dog come in. She was about a year old, German Shepherd mix. I love the Shepherds, so I take them. She had been an outside dog. It took about 3 weeks for them to trap her. She was out running and she was so scared of people. She had never been inside. You brought her inside and she dropped to the floor. She peed all over herself. She needed to be an outside dog. She wanted to be. She was happy. She would roll in the grass. She was a whole different dog when she was outside. Typically, rescues don't adopt to outside only homes, because we believe that animals need to be inside. But we had to make an exception for her because she didn't want to be inside and she was already over a year old. So I found this family who had reached out that wanted an outside dog. And I kind of went over my concerns of why that's not the greatest thing. And they'd lived out in the country. So we were worried about coyotes and roads. And it took about 4 months. And after bonding with that family, she slowly started wanting to come inside. And now she's a fully inside dog. She goes outside, she runs and plays. She's a total 180 dog. But I only had her for 2 weeks because she fit right in with them and she bonded with them super quick. And I wasn't the right home for her. She needed an outside home that would let her be outside until she was comfortable to come in. So I was able to place her pretty quickly.
Awesome. Thank you. So when you're looking at placing them into homes, I know some rescues are really picky and they try to really match to a good home so that they're not having dogs come back into the rescue. I know one of the rescues that I know you've worked with, they do like foster, they get placed for like a trial period. How have you seen those trial periods work? Is that something that is really successful in keeping dogs in the home where you're like, is it like a 2-week thing or how does that work, trial?
Typically, so most of the rescues that I do foster for do a 14-day trial. Typically, they are pretty successful. I just had a litter of Rottweiler puppies and we do a foster to adopt situation where at 12 weeks old, after they've had 2 sets of vaccines, they're able to go into the home so they can start bonding. And so they actually get a longer one. They get, like 6 weeks of a trial for them. but 14 days is a flexible. It depends on the dog, and it depends on their situation that they came in before and how they behaved in the foster home.
Mhm.
A lot of the rescues that I'm with really give me a lot of autonomy, to kind of pick and choose based on
Mhm.
the dog that's in my home. So I've had dogs that have had 2-week trials. I've had dogs that have had 1-week trials. And I've had dogs that have had about 6-week trials because their
Mhm.
temperaments and stuff. And it takes each dog, it takes them certain amounts of time to be able to kind of settle in and start showing their personalities, and kind of readjusting after being in my room or my house with my rules, and then going into a new house with different rules. So yeah, I'd say that the adoption trial period is really beneficial. It's so long as people understand that 2 weeks may not be enough. It may need to be longer.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Would you just tell me your favorite rescue story? I don't know, maybe you don't have a favorite rescue story. Or yeah,
When
so if you
you
have,
sent me
I'd love
that
to hear it.
question, we sat down and we talked, and we were just rubbing our heads like which one, if we had to pick one. And I don't know that I could give you one specific that is my top favorite, because we've decided that my favorites are all of my hard ones, all of my ones that had so much time and effort and energy that went into them, because I ended up appreciating the dogs that came out of the situation. So I specialize, especially working in a vet clinic and having the medical knowledge. I tend to specialize in the emaciated dogs, the
Okay.
malnourished and the really skinny ones. Those probably lead more to my favorite, because when they come in, we've had dogs that, so on the body scale, there's 0 to, I believe this scale is 8. I'm not sure what the scale is now, I can't remember, but we get dogs that come in that are skin and bones, that their organs are shutting down, that euthanasia is probably the kinder option.
Mhm.
um and their eyes are black and dead, and they don't stand up and they don't wag their tails, and when you hold them they just collapse in your arms. But right around, they also, so you have to do really slow refeedings with them. And then they all go through a behavioral stage where they get food aggressive. Once they start
Mhm.
feeling kind of good and their bodies start like, oh, I'm alive again, they start becoming really food aggressive. So then you have to start working on behaviors as you're trying to get them healthy. But eventually they hit this point where they just get that spark back in their eye. And if you look at your dogs when they're happy, you see that glow, you see that like shine in their eyes that this is a happy dog.
Mhm.
And with every emaciated dog that I've ever had, they get that life back in their eyes, and then they flip. Their behavioral stuff just goes away, and they decide, I don't want to live like this anymore, and they just end up being the happiest, like most loving dogs. So I think my emaciateds are probably my favorite, but it's the ones that make me
Yeah, the
put
work.
the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, I mean, for so many things, the more work you put in, the like, I
You
don't know.
appreciate
Yeah, you appreciate it and you feel proud of yourself and you feel proud of, I mean, for me, working with a hard dog, I feel proud of myself, but I feel really proud of the dog for putting, I mean, they're doing work too. So
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Uh,
And seeing that flip in their eye, especially in training, you talk about that during your classes, that one of the weeks, I can't remember what week it is, but it just switches and they're like, oh, we're here to work, and they're just happy and they do it. That's
mhm.
the rescue world too, that one of the days they just flip and they're like, we're gonna do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you again for all of your time. Do you have anything else that you would, I mean, advice or anything you would want to share?
Thing that I think I can push for that is just being patient. Um, while training is a paid for thing, and we definitely appreciate having your expertise in that, the rest of us that are in rescue, it is all volunteer based. So I don't get paid, the president doesn't get paid, nobody gets paid. And so when we've got these big Facebook groups and thousands of people flooding with messages interested in dogs or needing their dogs rehomed or
Mhm.
whatever, we do end up getting a lot of frustrated people that, hey, I applied for a dog and I haven't heard anything. Well, that's because we also have our 9 to 5 jobs and have our kids in their sports and have our own dogs. And we try. So I think as far as adopting from rescue, just being patient. Squeaky wheel does help. The ones that are like, hey, I'll try to bug, but I'm still here, still interested, is the biggest thing. It also shows that you're really interested if you're continuing to hound us and in a nice way. And then if you're adopting, just remembering that great things take time and all dogs are capable of being great, just so long as you're willing to go easy and work through them. And remember that whatever histories they have, it's going to take time to get over those pasts and create not memories, new behaviors, new things, working through those things, just like us. If we had childhood trauma, a lot of us are still dealing with those in our adult lives. So it's dogs are the same way. It takes time. So just being patient with them too.
Awesome. Well, you are so knowledgeable. You have, I mean, I love just all the stories that I've seen from you just on Facebook and things like that. And I just have loved working with you and the passion you have for these dogs. And so I really appreciate your time and kind of just sharing a little bit more about your experience and the rescue world. And if people are interested in working with a rescue, is it kind of just do research and find one that kind of matches your personality, or is it easier to work with a few different ones, or just one to start out with?
There are tons. If you're looking for breed specific, there are like German Shepherd specific rescues, Border Collie specific rescues, Shar-Pei specific, Great Pyrenees specific. There are specifics. Some of those ones are further away. Here in Idaho, we've got a lot of just general. But I would recommend starting with either a local one or one that has fellow fosters in the area. So the two that I foster for a lot are Friends Forever Animal Rescue and then Paws Rescue. They're both out of Jerome and the Boise Twin Falls area. However, there are fosters in Pocatello and Idaho Falls that regularly foster for them. So as long as you have local help, then I would say that branching out is okay. As long as you know that they have fosters in the area that can jump in and help if you need help.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you again.